Men who were working for the CIA's army were responsible for bringing all that cocaine into Los Angeles that sparked the crack epidemic.
The CIA's army, Webb says, were the Contras, the anti-communist rebels fighting the government of Nicaragua back in the 1980s, an army founded and funded by the CIA. Webb wrote that some Contra supporters smuggled cocaine to America to raise money for their cause.
The CIA has been bringing drugs into this country.
As then CIA Director John Deutsch discovered, it's an accusation that rings true for many, especially for some in the African-American community. And Webb's story has taken on a life of its own.
And Gary,
On the talk show circuit and the internet, some have even gone beyond Webb's charges to accuse the CIA of conspiring to target young African Americans.
Was the CIA willing to poison our cities and crack cocaine?
On the basis of what you learned, do you believe that there was a conscious decision, a meeting where someone sat down and said, we're going to poison the youth of black America, and here's how we're going to do it?
These guys were looking to raise money, and I don't think it mattered to them where they did it. They just went where they could raise the money.
Gary Webb says his stories were largely based on the testimony of a drug dealer with Contra connections who became a U.S. government witness. And many Americans do seem willing to believe that their own government could have been involved in drug smuggling. So was the U.S. government involved in any way? Dateline decided to take a second look.
Crack use spread like wildfire in the early 1980s. And in Los Angeles, a drug dealer known as Freeway Ricky Ross was in the middle of it. Prosecutors called Ross the Walmart of crack. He made millions in the early 80s dealing to Los Angeles street gangs. Police say he was among the first to take expensive cocaine powder and cook it into low-cost, highly addictive crack, then distribute it through the gangs. Webb says Freeway Ricky helped trigger an epidemic of human misery.
It's destroyed our community. All the black men are in prison, most of us.
Police in Los Angeles say he virtually cornered the crack market, thanks to a steady supply of cheap cocaine. A pipeline so good that Ross was able to introduce crack to other cities, using his gang contacts, and to make himself, he says, a very rich man. Rick Ross's drug supplier did have connections to the Contras.
Pause. See? I told you they were all connected.
Rick Ross's drug supplier did have connections to the Contras. Dateline has been able to confirm that from former Contra leader Aden Pastora. And Pastora admits he received some aid from that drug supplier. Now retired, Dewey Claridge was the CIA's man in charge of Central America in the early 80s. He insists the agency had nothing to do with any drug trafficking or with any cover-up.
Oh, don't give me the conspiracy bullshit. Come on, you're a more intelligent man than that. Well, come on. I mean, come on. There has never been a conspiracy in this country.
Pause. Listen to this lying mother. There's never been a conspiracy in this country. There's never been a conspiracy in this country. You're lying. Why don't you say that to William Casey, who literally went on record and said that we'll know that our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false?
Never. But in the mid-1980s, there was a high-level White House conspiracy called Iran-Contra. Whatever you believe, Gary Webb's stories have revived interest in an issue that's been simmering since Ronald Reagan was at the White House. Were U.S. government officials aware of drug smuggling in and around the Contra movement? And did they simply choose to ignore it? One U.S. senator says, absolutely.
There's no question in my mind there is a complicity in the flow of drugs into this country, period.
A Senate investigation led by John Kerry of Massachusetts found that individuals who provided support for the Contras were involved in drug trafficking, and that one or another agency of the U.S. government had information regarding the involvement, either while it was occurring or immediately thereafter. Incredibly, according to Senator Kerry, smugglers even used the U.S. government's own airlift operation at El Salvador's Ilopango Airport to get cocaine back across the American border. This drug enforcement agent patrolled that same airport in the mid-80s.
It was just nonstop traffic coming and going, and nobody ever inspected their planes or their cargo or whatever.
Cele Castillo told Dateline he observed rampant drug smuggling at that airport.
Well, what we had was that we had Contra pilots flying out of Ilopango smuggling drugs into the U.S., cocaine specifically.
He claims the smuggling was so open it had to be condoned by the U.S. government. Castillo says planes would arrive filled with supplies for the Contras, then leave carrying cocaine for America, bound for military airfields in Florida and Texas, offloaded out of sight of the law, then shipped to California and other points in the U.S. And there's more. Castillo says when he reported all of this to his bosses at the DEA, he was told to ignore it.
So you were told point blank.
Point blank, stay away from it. It's a covert operation being run by the White House.
As for the CIA, it's denied ever aiding or condoning drug smuggling.
Reports were reaching the highest councils of our government, in the White House and in the Justice Department. There is no question of that. I can document that.
The White House and Justice Department disputed Kerry's report at the time, but he still believes some government officials turned a blind eye towards drug dealing in the mid-1980s.
See? And black people are out here voting for these people. Black people are out here voting for these people who put cocaine into their neighborhoods and then turned around and locked them up for it. Now let's listen to Freeway Ricky Ross and hear what he has to say about the crack epidemic.
You were a source for the journalist Gary Webb, who claimed that Blandon was funneling cocaine money to the Contras, either with the help of the CIA or with a kind of like turn the other cheek attitude from
Correct.
the CIA. Do you stand by Webb's reporting?
Since Gary's passed, you know, the CIA has come out and admitted that they were working with known drug traffickers. So now it's no longer this myth or this perception that it may have happened or it may not have happened. It absolutely happened. The government admitted it. They put it in their own report.
Sometimes it spins off into theories like, oh, the government purposely created the crack epidemic in LA. You wouldn't go that far, would you?
It doesn't matter if they purposely planned on doing that. What wound up happening is it flooded the ghettos of America. Yeah. 600,000 black men are in prison right now for nonviolent crimes. Our prison industry has boomed, so that happened. You know, why did it happen? Was it personally targeted? We may never know. Oliver North and those guys were given a pardon before they ever went to trial, so the evidence never came out.
And in case you don't realize how serious the crack epidemic was in LA, allow me to show you.
As early as 1981, reports of the alleged crack epidemic began surfacing in Los Angeles. Crack rock was cheaper, purer, and easier to get than traditional cocaine, and it took lower income areas by storm. By 1983, the epidemic had taken hold of the city, turning communities into war zones. And soon, crack became a national crisis.
Today, there's a new epidemic, smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack. It is an uncontrolled fire.
Reagan's Anti-Drug Abuse Act imposed harsher sentences on crack than traditional cocaine use, leading to a decades-long debate that the law was unfairly targeting minorities and lower-income neighborhoods who couldn't afford the more expensive cocaine powder. Incarcerations in LA skyrocketed. By 1995, the California Department of Corrections increased its black and Latino inmates from 21,476 to 88,376, more than a 400% increase. This led to broken families, an overblown foster care system, increased violence, and a growing skid row that crippled the nation.
Now let's skip ahead a bit to everybody's favorite savior, Joe Biden. Now, what most people don't know is that after the Reagan administration brought cocaine to the African American community and took zero responsibility for it, Joe Biden came along and created the crime bill to lock black people up for the shit that he and his racist buddies created. And before I even dive into Biden's dubious pasts, let me state this for the record. In my honest opinion, in some ways, Joe Biden is even worse than Trump. Yes, I said it. Joe Biden is worse than Trump.